Okay, so starting off today's show, we will do the same thing that we do every Tuesday edition of the Zach Kroll Sports Podcast, and that is with me giving you guys my 10 main takeaways of the week. So, without further ado, boys, hit the music. Here we go. Takeaway number one. I told you to watch out for the Seattle Seahawks. I told you guys that when their running backs get healthy, this is a different football team. And watching the Seattle Seahawks on Sunday against the Los Angeles Rams, it was one of the more impressive efforts I've seen all season. Because let's face facts, the Seattle Seahawks are playing some of the best football in the NFL right now. But here's the crazy thing. I don't think they're doing it in the same way that many people expected them to. I was someone that before the season started actually picked the Seahawks to win the Super Bowl. But why did I pick the Seahawks to win the Super Bowl? It was because of their offense. It was because of Russell Wilson and DK Metcalf and Chris Carson. And I thought their offensive line would be improved. But throughout the first 8 to 9 weeks of the season, I think we could all agree, this Seahawks defense was probably the worst in the league. And literally, midway through the season, I don't know what happened, but they went from being the worst defense in the league to one of the best defenses in the league. And I don't know if it's just Jamal Adams coming back. I don't know if it's just the acquisition of Carlos Dunlap. But I think if you ask me, who is the biggest threat to the Green Bay Packers right now, I would say Seattle. As for the Rams, another really disappointing effort. Jared Goff and that contract could be something that the Rams could regret in a couple of years. And I'm not really sure where they go from here. John Wolford will be starting on Sunday. Winning you're in, it could be ugly. Takeaway number 2. I understand that the Los Angeles Chargers have been playing a little bit better as of late. But come on, you can't bring Anthony Lynn back. And I understand the argument of, okay, even though he hasn't had the best season, you don't want to ruin the development of Justin Herbert, and you don't want him to have 2 head coaches in 2 years. Well, I got to be honest with you, that's a bunch of nonsense. I think Justin Herbert is so good and is so talented that whoever becomes the next Chargers head coach, he'll be fine. But more importantly, I just don't know how you could watch 16 games of Los Angeles Charger football this season and then think to yourself, okay, Anthony Lynn should be the head coach again next year. This guy has just screwed up game after game after game. He doesn't know how to manage the clock. Each and every week he says, okay, yeah, I took over the special teams to try to improve the unit. That's his main specialty. But the special teams notably has gotten worse since he's taken over. And the Chargers, once again, the other day, they were up on Denver, 16-3, and still almost found a way to lose that game. I think Anthony Lynn is a coach that is very well respected around the league. Everyone watched Hard Knocks and really was able to appreciate everything that he had going. But at the same time, when I look at this Los Angeles Charger team, I think they would be best suited to go in a different direction at head coach. And I think Anthony Lynn could be a guy that could be a very successful coordinator. He is obviously very well respected around the league. But if I'm a Los Angeles Charger fan, I don't want him being the head coach next year. I'm curious to see what they would do with the offensive coordinator, Shane Steichen. I'm not the biggest hater of him. I think he's a solid coach, and I think the Chargers should even maybe consider keeping him around as either the head coach or remaining the offensive coordinator if they really think that Justin Herbert will be that affected by a coaching change. Takeaway number 3. I'll give the Kansas City Chiefs credit. They're 14-1. They've won 23 out of their last 24 football games. Super impressive. But at the same time, every time I watch the Kansas City Chiefs play, they become more and more vulnerable, which is good news for the rest of the NFL, because there was a time very early in the season and even recently that people just had the mindset of the Kansas City Chiefs are unstoppable. When they play their best game, they are very hard to beat. I understand that. And when they are at their best, I don't see anyone beating them. But at the same time, when have they played their best football? Have we watched a Kansas City Chief game this season yet and say, okay, that was just an A-plus effort? I think it was one game. It was that Monday Night Football game against the Baltimore Ravens. But we all know that's a pretty long time ago now. And the fact that the Chiefs should have lost at home to the Atlanta Falcons, I think if you watch that game from start to finish, we could all agree that the Falcons were the better team, as crazy as that sounds. And I'll be honest with you, if it wasn't the Falcons, I think there's a very good chance the Chiefs lose that game. We all know that the Falcons just have a specialty of losing leads and losing close games. But look at Kansas City's most recent stretch. They barely beat Carolina at home. They barely beat the Raiders. They barely beat the Dolphins. They barely beat the Broncos. They barely beat the Saints when they dominated them throughout the game. I think the Chiefs, when they're at their best, are the team to beat in the NFL. I don't think there's any denying that, but I think we haven't really seen an A-plus effort from the Chiefs, and maybe Andy Reid is just hiding stuff. Maybe by playoff time, the Chiefs just turn it on and remind us by far and away who the best team in the league is. But if you watch the Kansas City Chiefs over the last 6 or 7 weeks, to me, I don't think they look like, by far and away, the best team in the NFL like some people are trying to crown them. Takeaway number 4. Respect for Mitch Trubisky and the Bears, and I'll give him a lot of credit. But with that being said, I don't think the Bears could fool themselves here. Mitchell Trubisky deserves credit. Matt Nagy deserves credit. The Bears' offense over the last couple weeks have been on fire. They've been great. They've been one of the best offenses in the league. But good games against the Vikings and the Jaguars and the Texans, 3 of the worst defenses in the league, that is not going to convince me that Mitchell Trubisky is the long-term answer at quarterback for the Chicago Bears. Now, let's see what he does on Sunday against the Green Bay Packers. This is probably going to be the biggest game of Mitchell Trubisky's career. And I understand he lost that playoff game against the Philadelphia Eagles a couple years ago, but I don't think his career was really riding on the line in that game. This game against the Packers, if Trubisky doesn't play well and the Bears miss the playoffs, I do not think that he is going to be the quarterback of the Bears next season. But if he plays well, which wouldn't be shocking, the Bears are at home. They've obviously been playing great. I really like the chemistry that he's been developing with Allen Robinson. So we'll see what happens. But at the same time, if I'm the Bears and Trubisky doesn't play great next week, I don't think I'm just convincing myself that he is still the quarterback of the future just based on a couple good games against poor defenses. But at the same time, Trubisky and Nagy deserve credit. This Bears offense was borderline unwatchable throughout the first couple weeks of the season. And I'll say this, if the Bears were literally playing any other team but the Packers, I'd be pretty confident for them to win this week. I think they played really well against Jacksonville, and I understand you could say, oh, it was against Jacksonville. How much does that really matter? It was a really nice game by Chicago. Jimmy Graham was balling out. David Montgomery has very quietly become one of the 10 best running backs in the league over the last couple weeks, and the Bears' offense is humming. I'll be very curious to see how exactly they do against the Packers. Takeaway number 5. I say it every week, but I was wrong about Josh Allen. I know it. And the thing is, I think if you look at the Buffalo Bills and how exactly they've built their team over the last couple years, it is a model for every other NFL franchise to follow. We all remember when the Bills drafted Josh Allen, not many people loved that pick. This is a guy that coming out of Wyoming, we all knew had a rocket arm. He's super athletic. He could run, but he has no accuracy. And for me, I always believed that accuracy was just a trait that isn't teachable. But that's not the case at all. The job that Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll have been able to do with this Buffalo Bills offense is incredible. They put up 30 points in their sleep like it's nothing. And the more and more I watch this Buffalo Bill team, I think that their offense may be able to go punch for punch with the Kansas City Chiefs. But Buffalo realized that in order for their young quarterback to succeed, they need to put him in the most favorable position as possible. So what do? They get Stephon Diggs. They draft Gabriel Davis. They draft Zach Moss. And you can see that this Bills offense is significantly improved. I'm telling you, I don't think I've ever seen a player get so much better in a span of a year than Josh Allen has this year, going from his second year to his third year. Last year, Josh Allen was towards the bottom of the league in yards per attempt. He was towards the bottom of the league in completion percentage. And if you listen to this show, you guys know that those are really the two quarterback stats I value the most and he has been rising up in the leaderboard of the stats in 2020. And the Buffalo Bills right now are just one of the most fun teams in football to watch, and I think they are a legitimate threat to Kansas City and the rest of the NFL to win the Super Bowl. Takeaway number 6. I think Mike Vrabel needs to adjust his coaching strategy. And what I'm saying is, Mike Vrabel just needs to go into every game thinking, okay, the only way we're winning is if we're scoring 30-plus points. And let me explain. The Tennessee Titans defense is atrocious. They're approaching Seattle Seahawks week 1 through 8 bad. They cannot stop anyone to save their lives. And I totally understand. It's one thing to get lit up by Aaron Rodgers and that dynamic Packer offense, but this is a weekly occurrence. They got lit up by the Cleveland Browns and that offense. And right now, the Tennessee Titans, just on the defensive side of the ball, are not playing good football. Now, the good news for them is I do think that their offense is very capable of putting up 30-plus points against basically anyone in the league. Even though he didn't play great on Sunday Night Football, I still do believe in Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback and Arthur Smith as an offensive coordinator, and obviously Derrick Henry and A.J. Brown as weapons. But at the same time, Mike Vrabel just needs to stop punting from midfield on like 4th and 3 in the first quarter. Because you know that your defense is just going to let the other team go right down the field and score. And as much as I like the Tennessee Titans, as much respect as I have for a head coach like Mike Vrabel and the run that the Tennessee Titans were able to go on last year in the playoffs, I cannot see that happening this year just because their defense is not only bad, it's awful. They cannot stop anyone, and I think on Sunday Night Football in the snow against Green Bay, they were just as vulnerable as ever, and Aaron Rodgers and the boys were able to take advantage. Now, if Tennessee beats Houston, they will win the AFC South. They'll get a home playoff game, which is good for them, but at the same time, if they want to go further, their defense needs to get better quickly. Takeaway number 7. Another thing I called when I had my guy John on the show last week. Cliff Kingsbury and the Cardinals, not very good right now. And Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, Robert Saleh, they ran circles around Cliff Kingsbury and that spread offense. And if you watch the Arizona Cardinals 2 weeks ago against Philadelphia, Kyler Murray was phenomenal in that game, but the only thing was Cliff Kingsbury's play calling was horrible. If you watch the Arizona Cardinals this season, you'll know that Cliff Kingsbury, I believe, single-handedly has cost the Cardinals at least 1 or 2 games by himself just with poor clock management. And I think on Saturday against the San Francisco 49ers, Kyler Murray just looked a little banged up. I think he's wearing down a little bit. When you run as much as he has, and when you play that spread offense style, when you're having him throw 50 or so times some games and 40 in another, I mean, it's just not a recipe for success. And as much as I love Kyler Murray, I gotta be honest with you. Are we sure that Cliff Kingsbury is the right coach in order for him to succeed for the rest of his career? Because to be honest with you, I'm not really sure that he is. I think Kyler Murray could be trending down that same road that Aaron Rodgers was with Mike McCarthy. I'm confident that if Aaron Rodgers is playing with a coach like Matt LaFleur for his whole career, he has more than 1 ring right now. And I just don't want that to happen with Kyler and Cliff Kingsbury. I understand Cliff is a guy that offensively has been known to be one of the smarter minds around football, but let's face facts. At Texas Tech, this dude had Patrick Mahomes. He went 5-7 a couple times. He was not very successful in terms of winning games at Texas Tech. He also let Baker Mayfield walk out the door for Davis Webb. I was never a believer in Cliff Kingsbury, and I believe he's costing the Cardinals big time. Takeaway number 8. The Pittsburgh Steelers flipped the switch in that second half, and I still believe that if their offense could play anywhere close to that, the way they did in the second half against the Indianapolis Colts, I believe that the Pittsburgh Steelers are still a threat to make a deep run in the playoffs. Now, the concerning thing is, in the first half of that game, they couldn't do anything, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and then all of a sudden, Ben Roethlisberger just comes out swinging and just throwing bombs for the first time in 5 weeks. Juju Smith-Schuster also didn't do the TikTok before the game. They actually did a TikTok after the game when the Steelers clinched their AFC North Division title. But I told you guys before the season started that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to win this division on the back of their defense, on the back of the return of Ben Roethlisberger, and it may not have been pretty, but the Pittsburgh Steelers win the AFC North. And as for Indianapolis, that's a tough game. When you're up 24-7 in the second half against that Pittsburgh Steelers offense that, let's face facts, really has not been able to do anything over the last couple weeks, and you combine that with the fact that Phillip Rivers and the Colts, if they would have won this game, all they would need to do in order to make the playoffs is beat Jacksonville next week, and they'll be in. But now, they need to beat Jacksonville, and they need help. They're either going to need Baltimore to lose to Cincinnati, which is super unlikely. They're going to need Miami to lose to Buffalo, which is possible, but there are no guarantees. Or they're going to need the Browns to lose to the Steelers, which could be a little more unlikely now that the Steelers have announced that Mason Rudolph will be the starting quarterback next week against Cleveland. That is a real missed opportunity for the Colts, and I've been a guy that has been very high on the Colts throughout the season. I am a guy that has said if Indianapolis makes the playoffs, their defense could be a legitimate threat to a team like Kansas City or a team like Buffalo, and now who knows if they're even going to make the playoffs, and their defense cost them against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Takeaway number 9. The Dallas Cowboys and Mike McCarthy actually deserve some credit. And if you've listened to the show, you will know that over the course of the season, I really have not been the biggest Mike McCarthy or Dallas Cowboy fan. But I actually did predict them to beat the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday, and they made me look smart. I think we could all agree that Andy Dalton is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think that since he's taken over and has gotten a little bit more comfortable in this offense since he came back from COVID, Dallas has been very improved. And somehow, some way, if the Dallas Cowboys could go into MetLife Stadium and beat the New York Giants, and then Philadelphia beats Washington at home week 17, then somehow, some way, the Dallas Cowboys are going to represent the NFC East in the playoffs and get a home playoff game. I mean, can you imagine that? That would be crazy. And I'll say this also. I've been a guy that since very early in the season, I've never been a fan of Mike Nolan. I didn't really understand why Mike McCarthy decided to bring him in. Oh, I guess I do understand because he was the guy that gave Mike McCarthy his first real opportunity to be a head coach in San Francisco, but I didn't like that hire, and I think early in the season, Dallas's defense was really costing them. But guys like Aldon Smith, guys like DeMarcus Lawrence have really been able to stay focused and improve as the season has gone on, especially the Dallas Cowboys defense as a unit. It's been much improved, and I'm going to be very curious to see if they could go into New York and handle the Giants with both teams really playing for a lot. The division title is going to be on the line with those two teams, assuming Philadelphia could beat Washington at home. So I think it's going to be a very fascinating game, Giants-Cowboys. But McCarthy and company does deserve credit for sticking with the process, going with Andy Dalton, and then beating the Philadelphia Eagles at home, especially when they were down 14-3 early. Takeaway number 10. I understand that the Cleveland Browns were missing their whole wide receiver core against the New York Jets on Sunday, and that could be a big reason why they lost, especially when they figured out that all of those guys were not going to be able to play only about 12 hours before the game. But I'll say this also. Even with that being said, when you're the Cleveland Browns and you're playing for your playoff lives against the New York Jets, that's just a game you have to win, even without your wide receivers. And I understand the Jets did beat the Rams last week, and the Jets are playing their best football of the season. They actually look like a good, competent football team right now. But at the same time, Cleveland's offense just looked broken. And I've also been a guy that has been advocating for Kevin Stefanski to be head coach of the year, but that was his worst coaching performance on Sunday. You have to know that when Baker Mayfield is your quarterback and you don't have any wide receivers active at all, basically, you cannot be having him throwing the ball 50 times. That is not the best way for Baker Mayfield to succeed. That was honestly something Freddie Kitchens would do, and Hunt nor Chubb were really able to get going at all. Sam Darnold played well against a pedestrian Browns defense, and even though Cleveland does catch a little bit of a break, considering the fact that when they play Pittsburgh next week in a win-and-you're-in situation, that Mason Rudolph will be under center, it's hard not to be a little bit disappointed with the Browns, because they could have had this game against the Jets and they wouldn't have to worry about clinching the playoffs. They easily could have had the Monday night game against the Baltimore Ravens, and they couldn't have, and now they wouldn't have been worried at all about clinching the playoffs. But let's see what they do against Pittsburgh. Cleveland overall has had a really good season, and obviously, once again, it was unfortunate what happened to their wide receivers, but still, that's no excuse. When your playoff life is on the line, you have to beat the Jets.